This morning I have advised the Governor-General to accept Michael Wood's resignation as a Minister. Yesterday I was alerted to additional shareholdings Michael held in the J.M. Ferry Family Trust, of which he is both a trustee and a beneficiary. These new shareholdings raise around Michael not identifying and managing potential conflicts of interest. In particular, the Trust holds shares in Chorus, Spark and the National Australia Bank. As Minister of Immigration, Michael made the decision to include telecommunications technicians on the immigration green list. This followed representations from the telecommunications industry, including Chorus, seeking those changes to the green list. Michael also has a shareholding in the National Australia Bank, the parent company of the Bank of New Zealand. That was not disclosed in any of the conversations Cabinet had around a market study into banking or other relevant recent Cabinet conversations. Despite repeated requests from the Cabinet Office and myself for Michael to manage his shareholdings, he's repeatedly failed to identify, disclose and appropriately manage conflicts of interest. When I stood Michael down as the Minister of Transport, I asked him if there was any other relevant information I should know about, and he indicated there was not. It's become evident, therefore, that not adequately managing his airport shares was not an isolated incident, and it was therefore not appropriate for Michael to continue as a Minister. I've also formed the view that the system that we have in New Zealand for managing potential conflicts of interest amongst Cabinet Ministers also needs to change. When I learned that Michael had failed to sell his Auckland Airport shares despite 12 requests from the Cabinet Office to do so, I asked the Cabinet Secretary to provide advice on practical steps that could be taken to ensure that such a situation is not repeated again. As a result, I've agreed to the following 5 changes to tighten up the disclosure regime for ministers. First, Cabinet Office will move to quarterly reporting of conflicts of interest directly to the Prime Minister. Currently, Prime Ministers are only advised of new interests as part of the annual review or on an ad hoc basis if a particular issue arises. Second, there will be an escalation process if a Minister is not engaging fully with the conflict of interest process or following the advice of the Cabinet Office. Cabinet Office will now escalate the matter rapidly and directly to me to avoid a situation where a Minister can repeatedly ignore their guidance. Third, there will now be in-person annual reviews with each Minister to discuss their conflicts. At the moment, the annual review of Ministers is conducted by way of a letter at the end of the financial year. An in-person meeting will ensure that any issues can be more directly addressed and resolved. Fourth, each Minister will be asked to nominate a dedicated person in their office to support them with the conflict of interest process. That means that there will be another person in their office aware of any conflicts that they may have, who can act as a second pair of eyes to assist them in the appropriate management of those conflicts. And fifth, conflict disclosures will become a standing item at the start of each Cabinet or Cabinet Committee meeting. The Institute of Directors recommends maintaining an interests register as a standing board meeting agenda item, but that has not been past or current practice for Cabinet or Cabinet Committee meetings. One additional thing, I've also sought advice on a full restrictions regime on shareholdings for ministers. In Australia, the Code of Conduct for Ministers requires that they divest themselves of investments or other interests in any private or public business or company. That is, other than a public superannuation fund or publicly listed managed funds or trust arrangements where the Minister has no visibility or control over the decision-making. Adopting this approach would be a significant change to the New Zealand position, and it does require further advice and consultation. But it is my view that it's appropriate to take this step. New Zealanders expect and deserve very high standards from their ministers. While I do not believe that Michael Wood has acted with any intent of personal gain, his actions have let himself and the government down. He is a talented and hard-working minister. However, he has shown a serious lapse of judgment and has taken the appropriate action by resigning. I'll today advise the Governor-General to reallocate his portfolios to senior ministers. Carmel Sepuloni will become the Minister for Workplace Relations and Safety and the Minister for Auckland. Andrew Little will become the Minister for Immigration. David Parker will become the Minister for Transport. And Kitty Allen will become the Associate Minister of Finance. Like many others, I found this episode deeply frustrating. While I've only been in this job for about 5 months, I've taken a number of steps to stop the kinds of behaviour that have not met acceptable standards. Minister, for whom it is an honour to have such a role, need to ensure they manage their affairs to the highest standards. These have been unnecessary distractions from the firm focus that I want to bring as Prime Minister to delivering on the issues that are most important to New Zealanders.
How angry were you when you found out about these extra shares?
I was both angry and also incredibly frustrated. These are conversations that I've been having with Michael over several weeks, and I only learned of these yesterday when repeatedly, through numerous conversations, I've asked him if there are other issues that I should be aware of, and he has said no. That's beyond frustrating.
Is there a lack of respect for the office of the Prime Minister among the Cabinet Ministers?
No, I don't believe that's the case, but I also don't believe Michael's been able to provide an adequate explanation for how he has found himself in this position.
It's not just Michael Wood that's done this to you. You asked the same thing of Stuart Nash, and repeatedly he didn't tell you things that became problems later on. Do you have the respect of your ministers?
Yes, I believe I do, and Stuart Nash is no longer one of them.
How worried are you about how this is going to impact Labour's chances when it comes to the election?
I think in these issues, as Prime Minister, my first duty is to uphold the standards required of ministers. That's been my primary consideration here. Michael Wood hasn't met those standards.
But do you expect the public will look at these sagas not isolated but happening concurrently and think that this is something that they don't want to elect the Labour Party that has had this sort of track record?
As I've indicated, I've been in this job for 5 months, but in that time I like to think that I have treated ministers fairly and with respect, but where they have not upheld the standards that I expect of ministers, and I think the public should be able to expect of them, then I've taken appropriate action.
What are these shares worth?
I don't have a breakdown of what all of the shares are worth. The bank shares I do understand to be in the tens of thousands, and the others that I have a value for are below that amount.
So all of that package, can you just give us a ballpark figure of is it under 100,000?
No, I don't have that information.
Prime Minister,
can we get this clear?
Richard.
Are you saying that Michael Wood lied to you?
Michael Wood did not take the necessary steps to identify all of his shareholdings or all of his shareholdings through the trust to make sure that they were appropriately disclosed and that any conflicts were appropriately managed. And over the last few weeks, he's continued to do that. That isn't acceptable.
What happened how did that come to be disclosed yesterday?
So it was disclosed to my office yesterday morning. I found out around lunchtime. I then went through the information that came to light. I asked a series of additional questions to Michael and gave him an opportunity to come back to me with answers. Those answers came back last night. I met with him this morning at the first available opportunity to do that. And then I indicated, I accepted his verbal resignation at that meeting, which has subsequently been followed up.
Did he disclose the extra shareholdings yesterday morning?
Yes.
Do you believe that he willfully misled you?
I don't believe that Michael has willfully. This is still an issue that I still don't quite understand. I believe Michael to be an honest and decent person who's been a conscientious and hard-working minister and has been a very good minister. I still don't understand how, after all of this period of time, over 2 years with the Cabinet Office asking him to attend to these matters, we're still in this position now. In the last few weeks even, the fact that more information has come to light as those weeks have unfolded is still something that I do not understand.
2 weeks ago, when the airport shares came to light, on the tiles out there, you essentially had to stand up and give a personal assurance almost that he was okay and that he just made mistakes. I mean, how does that make you feel being put in that position that subsequently that's been totally undermined?
I'm very, very disappointed. I accept that human beings make mistakes, but this is over 2 years' worth, and even in the last few weeks, the amount of time it's taken for him to fully identify any other relevant issues again is not acceptable.
Did you ask your
Joe.
If he had fessed up to all of this when you first asked him if there was anything else, would he be in this situation? Is the punishment as a result of the not being honest with you from the start?
Certainly that hasn't been helpful. Clearly some of the decisions, the banking decisions, have only recently been made in the last few weeks. But Michael has had plenty of opportunity to identify his shareholdings, to make sure that any conflicts were appropriately managed, where necessary that he was divesting them. He's had more than enough time to be able to do that. I don't understand why he has not done that. He still hasn't given me a good explanation for why he hasn't done that. I don't accept that it simply was just something that he didn't get to. It should have been a priority for him, and it wasn't. And I haven't heard an explanation for him as to why, an adequate, in my view, explanation for him as to why he hasn't done that.
What was his explanation for why he didn't tell you? What was his explanation for why he didn't reveal these shares to you when you asked him 2 weeks ago?
His explanation was that they had been in the trust for a long time, and that he wasn't aware of them. I don't accept that.
Did he not go back and look and check? How did it come to light that he found out?
These are questions for him rather than for me. I first became aware of them yesterday.
If this issue is so important, why didn't you sack him?
What was that?
If this issue is so important, why didn't you sack him?
Well, he has resigned. I think that's an appropriate course of action. As I've indicated, I don't believe Michael to be a dishonest person. I believe him to be conscientious and hard-working. I don't believe that he has in any way been motivated by personal interest in any of the decisions that he's taken. But he has had a conflict that he has failed to manage, and therefore the appropriate thing for him to do is to offer his resignation.
Will he contest the election, or do you expect him to leave politics then?
Michael's future in politics is a question for him. There are people who have made mistakes in the past, who have gone on to have, great political careers in the future. What Michael chooses to do is a question for him, but clearly one of the priorities for him right now has to be to tidy up this part of his life, which he clearly has not given sufficient attention to.
So if he sticks around and Labour is re-elected back to government after the election, could Michael Wood become a minister again?
That's something that I would consider at the time. One of the things Michael clearly needs to do is make sure that he tidies up this part of his life.
Jessica. How can you maintain that he's a good minister when these pretty basic administrative things are being left and he's just not seeing the political risk with them as well? How could he possibly be a minister again?
He's not a minister now. He's certainly paid a consequence, paid a price for the fact that he hasn't attended to something that is, in my view, basic and something that's essential for all ministers to do.
Stuart Nash got sacked. You let Michael Wood resign. What's the difference?
As I've indicated, I think you can never draw direct comparisons between the two. They're different sets of circumstances, different sets of facts.
Where's Michael Wood now?
My understanding is he's on his way back to Auckland.
You've known Michael Wood for a number of years, and both, as I understand it, you were friends. How hard has this been for you to do?
Ultimately, it's the job. Jessica.
Why do you not believe him that he didn't know about the shares?
Ultimately, he is a trustee and a beneficiary of the trust, and it is incumbent on people who hold those positions, if they're the trustee and a beneficiary of a trust, to know what that trust is doing. If he was simply a beneficiary and someone else was managing the trust, that would be a different situation, but he is a trustee of that trust.
Trust Michael Wood?
On these matters, clearly he's let himself down, he's let me down, he's let the government down, he's let the people of New Zealand down. In terms of the work that he has done as a minister, I believe him to have been conscientious, to have been hard-working. I still can't quite believe that he's got himself into this position.
Did you ask him to resign?
I indicated to him that I thought his position as a minister was untenable.
Prime Minister, just with the disclosure yesterday morning, so that came from Michael Wood himself, and did he just, through his own review of his shares, discover that he had these, or how did it come about?
So my understanding is that he has been working to identify all of the interests in the trust concerned. My view is that he should have done that well before now, but that is the process that he has been engaged in.
And so yesterday morning he disclosed it to you. What's the...
It was
reason
in an email to my office.
And what was the reason for the, a day, I guess, before this
Well,
announcement?
there is a process you have to go through. You've got to make sure you've assembled the relevant facts. I did need to give Michael an opportunity to give me his explanation. And then, of course, there's actually some machinery things that happen. Before someone exits a role, you actually have to line up the replacements and so on. There's a certain mechanics of this that takes time. But I can reassure you that I'll be moving as fast as I can to get the issue resolved.
Has he indicated that someone's let him down, or that he isn't solely to blame for this, or is he solely accepting the blame for what's happened, and with respect to the shares as well?
The responsibility for managing conflicts of interest rests with ministers.
But with his, I suppose, the management of those shares, is he saying that there was anyone else that was involved, or anyone that was to blame, and like maybe he wasn't told something, or whatever? Or is it just solely on his shoulders?
As I've indicated, he is a trustee of the trust that holds the shares. He is the minister. He is the person who needs to identify conflicts, disclose them, and appropriately manage them.
For the most part, the ministers in your cabinet have rolled over from a previous leadership, and you've just outlined today five quite serious things that you're having to do to make changes to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen again. Has the government before your time as Prime Minister basically been running an incredibly relaxed ship when it comes to conflicts of interest and simply turning a blind eye to what has been going on?
No, and I can't speak for previous governments that I wasn't part of. The practices of the practices of the last 5 years have been the same as the practices.
Talk about nzherald.
But the practices of the last 5 years have been the same as previous governments before that. I think they can be tightened up, and I'm taking steps to do that. Yes.
Are you going to take this as an opportunity to clear the decks policy-wise in Michael Wood's portfolios? Are you still committed to light rail in Auckland?
It's not something I've even turned my mind to.
So does that mean you are still committed to light rail in Auckland?
Like I said, it's not something I've even turned my mind to. I'm sure David Parker will be having conversations with Auckland, as Michael Wood was, about a way forward for Auckland transport, because clearly it's a region in which there's a lot of pressing transport priorities.
Do you think there's a sense in which Michael Wood kind of just didn't think the rules applied to him?
As I've indicated, I don't really understand what has happened here.
Why did you decide to reallocate the portfolios, pretty meaty portfolios, to ministers that have already got a pretty significant workload instead of bringing new blood into cabinet?
I think 4 months before an election's not a time to bring new ministers in. We've actually only got, 8 parliamentary sitting weeks left to go before the election. There'll be an opportunity to reconsider that after the election.
Think they can handle the workload?
Yes, I do.
Michael would fight you when you suggested he should resign?
No.
Is it satisfactory to you that you don't understand fully what happened here? Like, is that something that you're just going to be able to put in a box and leave?
I think one of the things that Michael will need to reflect on, particularly as he thinks about what his own future is that he will need to have a better explanation than the one that he's produced so far.
You personally, though, because we've got Stuart Nash, and at the time we asked you questions as to whether you believe that he willfully misled you as well. There's the same questions that we're asking now. I mean, you personally, I'm sure, will be reflecting on how that looks, but are you happy with the fact that that's how it is? You're not going to be able to fully understand it and you're going to move on, or do you actually want to dig down and find out what happened? Well,
of course, clearly I'm not happy about it, but he's not a minister.
Do you concede this makes it harder for you to win the election?
The elections are going to be a tight and competitive race, and I'm in it to win it. Yeah.
These annual in-person conflict of interest reviews, are you going to be doing those yourself?
No, the Cabinet Office will do those. They're done impartially by the Cabinet Office. But typically what happens is when a minister becomes a minister, it's done in person the first time, and then the update is a sort of on the letters, on the papers update. The updates annually will now be done in person, and there'll be a quarterly report back to me of any additional disclosures that have been made to the Cabinet Office in the intervening period.
Was Michael Wood remorseful when you spoke with him?
I think it would be fair to say he's pretty crushed.
What was his behaviour like with you?
I think as anybody would be in a situation like this where they've just lost a job that they love, he was pretty devastated by that.
Michael Wood told us previously he'd been moving his investments into the trust to put into a managed fund. Are you confident that there wasn't more shares that he's already put into a fund that he held as his time in minister that could pose conflicts?
He's going through a process with the Registrar of Pecuniary Interests around that at the moment. The shareholdings, the reason that I'm here today is that the shareholdings that he has identified and has disclosed to me raised new questions around a conflict of interest.
So just to clarify,
you said you're going to be having ministers assign somebody in their office specifically to look at this, but you can have somebody in your office be monitoring the conflicts of interest that other ministers have?
Yes, so the Cabinet Office do that on my behalf, and I've strengthened up the process for how they are going to be reporting those to me. The bells have started to ring, and I know you guys have got to go to the bridge, so we'll have one more. Jessica.
Can I clarify? So this new information emerged because of the Registrar inquiry. Is that correct? And also, will that still take place now that he's no longer a minister?
We're still a member of Parliament, so my understanding from him is that he uncovered this in preparing all of the information to give to the Registrar as part of that inquiry.
That will still keep going to see if there's more?
What was that?
That will still keep going to see if there's anything more?
Well, he's still a member of Parliament, and so therefore, still covered by the Register of Pecuniary Interests.
Can you just confirm that as Prime Minister that you are still committed to the light rail promise? That's no change. Yeah.
I'm still absolutely committed to light rail in Auckland. We've still got work to do as the work that we've been doing, identifying the best options, the best route, the best way of funding it, all of those things are still on the table. The new Minister of Transport will need to get up to speed with that pretty quickly.
Are you confident that you have adequately managed all of your conflicts of interest?
Yes. Thanks, everybody.